audience will back up to the stage right now, and we're going to take questions. Michelle, there's someone who's going to be walking around the room with a microphone. I know we're a little tight on time, but we probably have time for a couple of questions about either survey that you might have.
Gary, I know you've been recently married. How many of your group are single versus married folks?
Bill knows I was recently married because I spent a portion of my honeymoon with him. My wife loved that. We do have the data in here about, and I'm flipping through the book as I speak to you, about that exact question. 47% married, 17% living with a partner, committed relationship, 25% of the people are single. So what we don't have, we did not drill down on, if of the 34% who are planning on leaving, are they single, are they, I think Dana's point to, if they're married, if they have children, they're much more likely to stay. My wife is due in 4 weeks, so we'll probably be here for a little while.
Thank you. Just out of curiosity, I was able to attend with a group of legislatures from the state of Massachusetts that were talking about taxes. And the figure that they threw out at that time is if you look at the total tax liability, in other words, taking your state income tax, your sales tax, room tax, all the taxes that you add up and put them all together, that Massachusetts ranks 42nd out of 50 in total tax liability. So going to the original survey that was statewide, when we're talking, if we are 42nd out of 50, and I did not do anything to confirm that, I'm taking what the state legislatures advised me as to being correct. So if we are 42nd out of 50 and we have people moving out of state because of taxes and taxation, that means that there's only 7 states that they can go to that have lower taxes than the state of Massachusetts. And then going to the Cape survey, they were saying, one of the things they said is that they're going to go to the South Shore or other places because of lower taxes. And from what I've been informed, that the majority of the Cape towns fall in the lowest third of local property taxes in the entire state. So therefore, we've got a community, Cape community, that's in the lowest third in a state that's in the lowest quarter. And so when we talk about, I think taxes always ends up being this boogeyman that everybody wants to say, oh, we're leaving because of taxes. But when you look at the reality of it, I'm really wondering the validity of that argument.
Quick point on the Cape, your comment on the Cape survey. The indication was not that they were leaving because of taxes. I think what we saw is the number one reason they were leaving was overall cost of living. So point of clarification. On the other issue, I had a conversation with the governor about this. I said, that's true. Why don't you tell that story? I'm sure everyone in the room is shocked to hear that number. So as an elected official, it's a marketing thing. Go out and tell the story about the tax burden of the state and try and clarify for young people that if you're looking in New York, the taxes are a lot higher. If you're looking here, they're higher. So it's a public marketing effort that has to be done. Dana can comment more on the specifics.
Yeah, on the exact number that you mentioned, and the exact number that you mentioned, I think it depends. I'm not sure if that was Cape specific or statewide. The statewide work that we looked at Massing suggests that Massachusetts is about the middle of the pack. So not one of the lowest, but certainly not one of the highest. And I think there are different organizations nationally that have different ways that they compute it. So I think that the numbers vary a little bit. But I do, just to pick up on what Gary was saying, a couple things. One is, and this did come out when we met with the governor, a lot of times people are moving to California, Manhattan, are the places that have low tax burdens. So I think there is this sort of reduced taxes is a view that comes out pretty quickly when you talk to people, but is worth some deeper probing. And I, like Gary, agree that it tends to be more part of a cost of living discussion in that, to the extent that people are paying their bills and, figuring out, how they're going to make it and sort of how they're going to put money aside and those things, they're not per se saying, it's the taxes that are putting me over the edge, but it's the taxes in addition to the housing costs, in addition to the other things that they're spending money on. So I do think there is a marketing opportunity. And then the final thing I would say in response is, I also think that it taps into the confidence gap, and that to the extent that people are disgruntled about the level of taxes, it is related to their perception, right or wrong, on what the taxes are being used for or not being used for, and to the extent that there are these huge public policy challenges that we face, that they're not seeing progress, they're not seeing traction. And so I think it's a combination of all of those factors that sort of lead to this response: reduce taxes, make taxes lower. But I do think you raise a good point in that whether the number is 42 or 26, Massachusetts is clearly not at the top in terms of the tax burden, and oftentimes the places people are going are no lower anyways.
Gary, an observation and a question. You surveyed your own group, Cape Cod Young Professionals. I think we get a lot of information from that, but I'm not sure the net is wide enough. I'm not sure how many painters, how many framers for houses, how many people who repair outboard engines, how many people, landscapers, are included in that particular group, or how well they're represented. I think that's somewhat of a self-selecting group, and that's not meant as a criticism. I just think the net needs to be wider to get a real feel for where I know people are going and what they're doing. So the question I have for you is, did schools play any part in the thought process of young professionals in terms of the quality of schools for the children? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I didn't, I thought I tried to hit that point home more than once, that this survey is incomplete because of the lack of it. If I didn't, I apologize. But again, this is not a wide group of people. We do not have a certain segment of the population, as the gentleman indicated. In terms of the schools, I think the schools actually rated very highly, and you can see in both surveys, I believe the highest level of public confidence or confidence in public institutions was represented in the local public school system on both sides. We as an organization are trying to partner with school systems to send people in and speak with some of the local students and talk about the opportunities that are available to them on Cape Cod, because on the Cape, like anywhere, the first thing on a graduating senior's mind is, I can't wait to get to the other side of the bridge and never come back. And we've talked about that. I think that's sort of an American phenomenon. People do want to fly away from home. But we do want to reach into the schools. And again, I can't hit this point home enough, and apparently I didn't in my comments. This is a self-selecting part of the population. We do not have the painters, the landscapers. I don't want to say that we mirror the Mass Inc. study. We didn't have the resources and the time to do it. We would love to, at some point, get some grant funding and take a broader look at the overall population. But you're exactly right that they were not represented in this study. We have time for 2 more questions.
No? My next. Thank you for an excellent presentation. My name is Don, and the previous question addressed most of my concern, but maybe I can focus a little more. And again, what seemed to be conspicuously absent from the presentation was the word schools. And my question is, there's two questions. One is, how important are schools in the community itself, that the community have a school? And 2, how important is the school in consideration by those families that are deciding whether they want to stay or leave? Thank you.
I think it's an interesting observation that you both make, and that the importance of schools and that factor in people's decision really did not show up strongly in our work. So I don't know if it would be worth, at a future point trying to delve deeper into that, but it really was much more about the issues that Gary and I have been focusing on: cost of living, job opportunity, housing.
First of all, thank you both for your presentations. And I have a question for each of you. Dana, in the presentation that you gave us on Table 4, what can government do? There were two factors in there that drew my attention. One was reducing taxes, and the other was improving government. Were there any sub-factors in there that ask the question, where do we reduce taxes, or how do we improve government? And the question that I have for Gary on his presentation is, how is the nature of civic engagement shifting for young professionals? Thank you.
Thank you. In terms of where to reduce taxes, the answer is no, we were not able to get to that level. And in terms of how to improve government, I think this is an open question in terms of, to the extent, how much of the issues we were raised and the fact that people don't have confidence in their government has to do with sort of policy issues, and that we have these big challenges such as housing and cost of living that we've been talking about, that people acknowledge need to be addressed, yet sort of year after year we're still talking about them. So I think there's that piece of the equation. And then I think there's also the obviously, people's lack of confidence in terms of the integrity of the, institution, and, the sort of news that, as we've seen recently, whether it's been the local news in Massachusetts versus, the national news and the conviction of Ted Stevens. I mean, all of these things, I think, add into a public perception. So we had a public event in Boston following the release of this survey to also sort of probe, how much is it sort of substance and how much of it is, perceived lack of integrity. In some cases, might be genuine, in other cases, several people tainting a whole institution. And I think that, the general agreement is it's obviously both. When people look to, what's going on in our state, there's not a lot that makes them feel confident.
In terms of, I think the question was, how is the nature of civic engagement changing? I could stand up here and speculate on that. Unfortunately, this is the first survey of this kind that we've conducted. So you can look and see. It's almost like a balance sheet. It's a snapshot. You can look and see the levels of civic engagement are very high. They're very active in the community. They go to town meetings. They care about the nonprofit community. What I have no visibility into is what those numbers were 5 years ago, 10 years ago. I can't comment on how it's changing. I think what we see are some people who are very attuned to what's happening in the community. They want to be involved. 65% of them are going to town meeting. We were shocked. That's a very high number of young people at town meeting. But I don't have any visibility into where those figures were. It'll be extraordinarily interesting, I think, for us to look at that 5 years, 10 years up the road and see if there's some interplay, if that changes dramatically. But today, I can't comment on what the change has been. That's going to wrap it up. I want to thank you all for your time.
Right, they said no breaks, no one leaves. All right, I'm starting to feel like that was the young people show, and I'm the old folks that are coming up here to talk today. I am David Augustino, the Executive Director of the Cape and Islands Workforce Investment Board. I'm delighted to be here. It's a pleasure to work with Wendy and the Chamber staff to be able to present information that helps us in our decision-making as we're looking at activities and programs to engage in over time. Today, in my world, the workforce development world, we feel very lucky in Massachusetts because we have one of the top national resources here when it comes to the production and examination of labor market information. At Northeastern University, the Center for Labor Market Studies is widely recognized as one of the top institutions of its type in the country. Today, and I've seen the data set that today's presentation is based on, and that was about 190 pages of data. And I can assure you, we're not going to go through 190 pages of data, but Nita Fogg, who is a senior economist at the Center for Labor Market Studies, is going to give us a presentation this morning that will look in some depth at our labor force and other demographic features of our local economy. So, Nita, you're ready to go? You're ready.
Good morning. The report that was mentioned is right here. It's a report that we use to analyze a whole array of information and give a very comprehensive idea of the labor market and demographic situation. And a lot of the information that supplements this report is also prepared in CD-ROM that will be posted at some point somewhere. I don't know. I'm going to let David decide that. So there's all this information. First, technology. I need to get my presentation out. There it is. What I want to, initially, what the report, which is labor market developments in Cape Cod and Cape and Islands region, the report was, we had started putting this together earlier, before the meltdown of the economic sector, before all the problems in the economy that we are having right now. So I have modified the presentation a little bit to include a kind of an overview of what is happening to the economy. So I'm going to talk about short run and long run. So in the short run, as we all know, the economy is in deep, deep trouble. Massachusetts is doing slightly better than the nation, but you know the storm is so big that it is going to come our way. So that's the short run. But we also want to look at the long run and look at what are the underlying trends, demographic trends, labor force trends, and trends in the labor supply from the higher education institutions in this area. So we want to look at the long term also, but let's first look at the short term and try to see what is going on. So the purpose of this presentation is just to provide a review of the labor market development and look at it from the labor demand and labor supply context. So from the labor demand, the way we've done this is we've looked at the employment structure and trends in employment, trends in the number of jobs by industry. So we've looked at what's happened to employment over time and maybe more recently in terms of jobs. And then we have we'll also look at the occupational staffing patterns of these industries, which is, when you look at the industry employment, then you look at who works in these industries, and then connect that to the educational attainment. So that will give us an idea of the demand for different levels of education in this economy. And then, of course, we will look at areas of skill shortages. It seems kind of irrelevant at this time to talk about skill shortages, to talk about vacancies. However, it is something in the long run, if one needs to understand the economy, the markets, then it is important to also understand what the vacancy data are telling and what it means. So I will go through that very briefly. Like I said, it seems ridiculous to talk about vacancies at this time, but I will go through that just briefly to give you an idea. So that's the demand side. And then also the labor market is labor demand and labor supply. So clearly also look at the supply side and look at the size and composition of the population, of the labor force in this area. And then look at, that is the labor supply from the population, but then there is also the labor supply resource, or source of labor supply, which is the institutional source of labor supply from the number of graduates, the number of degrees awarded by schools and colleges in this area. And then finally, there is also another source of labor supply, an important source of labor supply that is frequently overlooked, is the number of graduates that come out of career and technical education institutions, what we commonly call tech schools. So we also have looked at that and looked at how many kids are graduating from these schools in the Cape and Islands region, and what kind of fields are they graduating from? Because that is an important labor source, a source of labor supply at entry level. To move forward, first thing, as I said, is regional labor market development. This is not really good news. I was hoping to give good news. Usually there's just gloom and doom that I wanted to avoid, but it is there, so let's go through it. This is just the labor employment numbers by industry since the time the national economy reached peak employment. So that was in December 2007. We reached a peak, and then ever since then, there's been a decline. Take this. So what you see over here is total employment declined by 1.2 million jobs in just over the last 9-10 months. So, and that's 0.9 percentage point. And in the private sector, the decline is 1.3 million. So we've had a huge and very sharp decline. And what you saw last month was that not only was there a 240,000 job decline, but there was a revision, upward revision, significant upward revision of the job declines in the previous 2 months. So we have pretty much fallen off the cliff over the last few months, over the last couple of months. And what you see is the decline is pretty much across the board. If you look at the goods producing sector, you can see a huge decline, 3.7% in the goods producing sector, 824,000 jobs. Service producing also a decline. And you go across the board, there are declines everywhere except these two sectors, educational services and health sectors. These are the only two sectors that have held up. But eventually, if we do go in a deep enough recession, and I hope we don't, but if we do go in a deep enough recession, then those declines will spread across. So the national economy has declined, employment has declined across the board, and in about 3 or 4 months ago, there was a little hope even for the manufacturing sector because the dollar had become so weak and exports had grown. But now the emerging economies are also slowing down. Everybody's slowing down in the world, and the dollar has grown stronger. Because a lot of people in the world, we still are a better place to park the money. So compared to the other countries, we're better. So the dollar is strong, and therefore the manufacturing sector also is experiencing a deep decline in employment. Now, how does New England fare? And more importantly, how does Massachusetts fare? And what you see is, nationwide, we've had a huge decline. Over the same time period, December 07 to September 08, New England has seen about 20,000 job loss, which is 0.3 percentage point. So it's much less than the nation. And among the New England states, of course, I think you all know Rhode Island had started going down long before December 07. But even then, since December, they've lost 13,000 jobs, 2.6% of their job base. In Massachusetts, we're doing much better. In the last recession, we were really doing poorly. In the last 2 recessions, as a matter of fact, we were really lagging behind the nation. This recession, we have done pretty well. We have held our own, and our employment, even December to September, has still grown. Now remember, the national economy, September to October, they revised the numbers for September, and October numbers were really bad. So I expect Massachusetts also to join in. Just this morning, the initial claims numbers were released, and there's a huge increase, initial unemployment claims. So our health and education sector, which are holding us up, are still holding us up. Technology was holding up quite well, but now, because of the worldwide decline, even technology is suffering setbacks. You see Abbott Labs, Verizon, everybody's laying off people. So Massachusetts has done well. Hopefully we will not have as steep a decline as a nation, but we are headed in that direction. So among the New England states, Mass and New Hampshire are still holding up. Everybody else is seeing a decline. In Massachusetts, and this is again over the past, since the December peak, Employment in the construction and manufacturing sector, if you see up there, construction and manufacturing sector is down, was down in the recovery, is down, it continues to fall. And then what you see is financial activities is down, retail trade is down, educational services and healthcare. These are the two sectors, again, holding us up. And then, of course, you see a small increase in the government sector. But there is a decline with the exception of two sectors that are holding us afloat. This is, oh, I'm sorry, that was New England. This is Massachusetts. In Massachusetts, you can see that there are, again, you see the same strength in the education and health sectors. And you also see certain sectors are still holding up, but construction and manufacturing have declined, and they will continue to decline sharply because of the housing crisis that we are seeing. So construction is definitely going to decline, and manufacturing has been declining for a long time. Manufacturing also depends on exports, and if our exports decline, which they have declined, manufacturing is going to suffer an additional setback. In terms of unemployment, you can see that the number of unemployed people in the nation has reached over 10 million in October, an increase of 41% since last year, since August of last year. And across New England also, the number of unemployed people has gone up since August of last year. And the unemployment rates also have gone up across New England, including Massachusetts, which was at 4.4% in August of last year, and 5.3 in September of this year. The nation went from 4.7 to 6.5, so the nation unemployment rate and the number of unemployed people is rising very rapidly. Where does New England fall in? This is the ranking of New England states, of all states actually, but we're looking at the rank of New England states based on relative change in the number of unemployed people. New England states, Rhode Island is right at the bottom, which means it has had the second highest increase. And Massachusetts is number 16. So we're in the lower middle of the pack. Maine and New Hampshire are also lower. So once again, to reiterate that Massachusetts is holding on much better, doing much better this time around than it did the last time. This is unemployment claims, unemployment insurance claims between September of last year and September of this year. You can look at the changes in the labor market with various measures. Usually all you hear about is the unemployment rate, but the unemployment rate is just one out of many indicators. You can look at labor force, you can look at the employment, number of unemployed, you can look at unemployment claims. All these kind of give you a very good detailed picture of what is happening with the economy. Now, UI claims in Massachusetts have increased between last year and this year, September, by 13.5, about 22%. But we're much lower than the nation. Over the same time period, the nation has seen about a 39 to 40% increase in unemployment claims. In the Cape Cod, in this Cape and Island area, UI claims have gone up by 430, 28%. So it's much higher than the state, although lower than the nation. The nation is about 40%. Now we go, so this is kind of the short term. What is happening now? How is the economy behaving currently? Now let's go, now I want to talk a little bit about long term, about demographic trends, labor force trends, and sources of labor supply. So I want to address each one of these briefly, just to give you an idea of what has happened over time, and when the recovery comes, and of course the recovery will come. When the recovery comes, where would we be, and how can we prepare for that? So it's important to understand the entire labor demand and labor supply and the labor market by looking at these data. So let's look at total population. This is the labor supply, just sheer measure of labor supply in terms of number of people. So how many people are there? In the Cape and Islands region, the total population between 2000 and decade, so 2000, 2005, 6, the total population increased by 1.3%, which is about the same, a little bit lower than the state, much lower than New England, and the nation increased much more sharply. And this is a problem that we've been seeing over the last decade and a half is that New England is suffering this loss of population. We're losing people, we're losing a lot of young people, we're losing a lot of well-educated people, and as a result of that, we are getting older because the younger population is leaving, so we're getting to be an older state. And the Cape and Islands region in particular is an extremely older area. About 22% of the population here is 65 and over, compared to 13% in the state. So most people come, I mean, my husband and I also thought of retiring down the Cape, you know, until we opened our financial statement last quarter, and, you know, retirement is way out there. But this is an area where people choose to retire, so this is a very elderly population. And therefore, understanding that, understanding A, it's an elderly population, B, what are the labor force attachment, what is the labor force attachment of this population? What is the educational attainment? Many of these people maybe saw their financial statements and decided that I might have to work. So how do we prepare for this older workforce? So the nation has seen an increase in the population. So, but the increase in population has slowed down over time, over the past 2 decades. But still, the population increase is greater in the nation than it is in the Massachusetts and New England region. I want to show this map because in the past, when I talk about labor market workforce areas, people always say, well, what about this college, and what about that college, and what about this school, which is outside the area. So I just want to point out that every time I refer to Cape and Islands area, I'm just talking about this red group. So if somebody is located here or in the green area, they will not be included in the numbers that I present today. Total population, as I said, increased by 1.3, so 3120 additional people in this area, in the Cape and Islands area, over time. And you can see the biggest increase is among 55 to 64. This is the baby boom generation moving through. So there's a big increase, there's an increase in the state and the nation in that group, in that population. You also see an increase in the 16 to 24-year-old population. There are two things underlying this, and quickly I want to tell you. One is, of course, this is the echo boom population, these are kids of the baby boomers. So you do see a bulge in that age group. But partly in the Cape region, there's also another factor going on. And without going into details of data, I just want to quickly tell you what is going on. 2000 numbers are based on the decennial census, which is conducted in April of 2000. 2005 and 6 are based on what is called the American Community Survey, which is conducted year-round. So there's one survey conducted each month. So it captures the summer population in this area as well, which the decennial census did not. And in the summertime, as you know all too well, if you come here, there are so many young people over here working to help us enjoy our vacation. So that swell in that 16 to 24, some of it is exaggerated because of the two different sources of data, and some of it is the echo boom generation. And then you can see that in the middle, like 35 to 44-year-olds, there's a decline of about 11%. So this is kind of the prime working group, working population, and this region has seen a decline in that population. So under 45, population declined by about 2,000, and 45 and older increased by about 5,000, 55 and older increased by 3,300. So clearly a very, very older population. Working age population. Now the population, when I say population, it's everybody, 0 and above. But when I say working age population, it's everybody of working age, which is 16 and above. Now remember, it includes everybody 16 and above, which means it also includes the 65 to 75 to 85-year-olds. These are all working age people. The working age population increased by 3.8% in the Cape and Islands region, Massachusetts. It's higher than Mass, lower than and the nation. So the working age population increased in the Cape area as well. However, look at the composition of the working age population, age composition, something that I was talking about. If you look at the bottom, 16 to 24, the blue bar is Cape and Islands, only 12% compared to 14 and 16% in the state and the nation. And as you go up, if you go to the very top, 65 plus, 26% of the working age pop in this region is 65 and over, compared to 16% in the state and about less than 16 in the nation. So this is clearly an older, much older region. So if you see 25 to 34, we are much lower. 35 to 44, you're much lower. 45 to 54, you're kind of equal to the state and the nation. And in the older population, you're way, way ahead of the state and the nation. What is the educational composition? Now, the number of people, the number of working age people just represent the total number who could work. The education represents the quality of these total number of people who could work. And this is actually not the educational attainment of the working age population, but the educational attainment of the labor force. Now, what is the labor force? The labor force consists of all those people who are employed and unemployed. So if somebody is not interested in working and is not working, that person is out of the labor force. So the workforce of the Cape and Islands area is pretty well educated, although not as well educated as the state. So you've got 36% college grads compared to 39% in the state. If you look at each educational category, if you look at just total post-sec, you got 66, 2/3 of your workforce does have some post-secondary education, compared to 64% in Massachusetts. But it seems like all that education is below. It's at associates, some college. So it's at a slightly lower level, but there is some parity in the educational attainment of the population over here to Massachusetts and New England. The workforce participation, we're moving. We started out with total pop. Then we went to working age pop, then we went to labor force. Now we are saying, what is the labor force participation? That means what fraction of the working age population is actually in the labor force? And in the Cape and Islands region, it's 61%, compared to 68% in the state. And why is it so? It's the elderly population. It's people, older people are much less likely to be in the labor force than younger people. And when you have a population, a working age pop consisting of 26% elderly, you're bound to see these differences. And you can see the change, you can see the differences in participation here. Among 16 to 24-year-olds, the blue bar again is the Cape and Island area. You have kind of a parity in participation, and you can see that the labor force participation is kind of like an inverted U. You have a lower rate of participation among the younger people, then you get the prime age, and then the elderly. And you can see that it's only 15 and 16% of the elderly population that actually participate in the labor force. This is where you see a big gap in the Cape and Islands region. Generally, labor force participation rises with educational attainment. People are more educated, more likely to participate in the labor force, more likely to find employment, more likely to earn higher earnings. In the Cape and Islands region, you see a huge gap between the bachelor's degree holders and master's degree holders between Cape and Island and Massachusetts, the state. Only 65% of those with a bachelor's degree are in the labor force. So here is the gap that represents resources that may be available, skilled people, educated people that are available that are not participating in the labor force. So if we ever need to tap into the population to reach out and get people, attract people to the labor force who are skilled, you have that. You have these people who are highly educated who are not participating in the labor force. So those big gaps, look at masters and above, 59 in the Cape, 80 in the state. So again, some of it is age-related, but there is a capacity here in participation among very well-educated population in this area. I'm going to skip through that. This is just tells you the exchange that the Cape and Islands region has with other areas, neighboring areas. And if you drove down here, I did drive down from the north, it's fairly apparent that it was a breeze. I just came down here, it didn't take me any time at all. There's not a lot of exchanging going on between workers over here and workers in other areas. Now, we already went to wage and salary employment. I quickly want to go through wage and salary employment numbers during the recovery. Why? During the past recovery, because we will recover, and if we do recover, where would we be? So I'm quickly going to go through this. I know I'm putting on a lot of numbers. The numbers are for my benefit, because I can't remember all this stuff off the top of my head. So if you see a lot of numbers and it turns you off, don't look at the numbers. Just listen to me. What you see over here is in the past recovery. So the recovery went from fourth quarter 2003 to the first quarter of 2007, which was the most recent available when we produced this report. What you see is the nation added 7 million jobs, which is a 5.4% increase. Massachusetts added 85,000 jobs, 2.7. So when we were in that recovery, Massachusetts did not add as many jobs, and all of the New England states did not add as many jobs as the nation. So we were kind of slow in that recovery, in the past recovery. If you look at where the recovery occurred, and I'm briefly going to point out, and you know the answer by now, 36,000 professional business services, 40,000 in educational health services. So education health has been holding us for a while, and professional business services, the professional technical services, those are very high level, engineering, architectural services, very high level sector that employs people with very high levels of education. So, and that's where the recovery was concentrated. And during the recovery, you can see manufacturing was declining. Construction at that time was increasing. Remember, that's what led to the problems we're in today, the housing boom. In the Cape and Islands region, and I just want to briefly show you what the employment, the composition of jobs is in this area. Because if you want to understand what the labor demand is, you need to know how many jobs there are. But you also need to know where the jobs are. And then you need to know what those industries, who do these industries employ. So let's look at where the jobs are. And the jobs are in this region mostly concentrated in accommodation and food services, 11%, and then you see 17% retail trade. So there's a huge concentration in those two sectors, and you see 17% in healthcare and social assistance. And the healthcare jobs are mostly concentrated outside of the hospital sector over here. They're mostly in ambulatory services, home healthcare, and the like. So the composition of jobs in the Cape and Islands region is different from the state. It's much more concentrated accommodation food. So these are much more lower level jobs that this region seems to have. And if the composition is of this nature, then the next discussion that I will go through will tell you what kind of jobs, what kind of job titles, what kind of occupations would one expect to be in this region. The one comment I do want to make about employment in this region is during the recovery, this region added only about less than 250 jobs. And then over the 2007 to 2008 first quarter, this region lost 673 jobs. So all the recovery that occurred from 2003 to 2007 was more than destroyed in the downturn from 2007 to 2008. So this region, the job gains were very, very mediocre, and the job losses are pretty, pretty steep. And I suspect because of the concentration in kind of leisure activities, which most people are going to cut down on, I suspect this region will suffer a serious setback in this recession. Because not only will all of us cut down on travel and tourism, but we also, the Cape and Islands region also gets a lot of tourism from Canada, New York I think in particular, and New Yorkers are hurting much more badly than we are because of this collapse of the financial sector. So the Cape and Islands region has seen a serious decline and did not see a big growth during the recovery. So this region has not been adding jobs.